keep all of our same practices for inter-school transfers, meaning that siblings that are attending a school, there's always the priority to keep siblings together when possible, and certainly at kindergarten, if you have an older sibling at the school site, they do get preference. And then we would authorize, the next item on the agenda would be to authorize Roosevelt to begin their curriculum and program development to implement the K-8. And then we would begin the process to expand Ben Franklin to include additional 6th grade classes that we anticipate to be 3 more classrooms for next year.
So you're asking for approval this evening. Could I ask a question?
Yes, you can, but we do also actually have a speaker card, so before
Okay.
we get into board discussion,
Sure.
I'd like to call Ms. Dart. If you still want to speak on this one as well as the next one. Yeah.
Melinda Dart, American Federation of Teachers. I was happy to see included here the choice of making FDR a K-8 school. I think that's great to have as an option for our community, and I'm glad to see that the school is on board to do that. And I know that the district and the board are going to be aware that with that change that the school will need resources for those students as they move into middle school, such as a full-time library and counseling time and more PE time. So I'm really happy to see this, this choice opening up.
Thank you, Ms. Dart. Okay, now board discussion.
Oh, that was all. Okay.
That was the only card on that one.
Melinda, you kind of on the same track as I was here on this, because I wrote notes about this. I don't mind, hearing about the K-8. I know Pacifica has done that in the past, and it seemed to have worked for them. But I want to be sure that we're going to offer our students in 7th, 8th grade all the same opportunities as possible that we're affording the other students in 7th, 8th. And it doesn't matter that it's on the same campus as long as they get all of the same things, because eventually there will be some students that it'll be lacking in their
Yeah,
full.
and I don't think we can promise, nor do we see examples of K-8s being able to offer the same program that a 7-8 school can, just because of the numbers of students, and the larger schools can offer more programs, more opportunities. But it is a choice that we give our community to say some communities have expressed the desire to stay at a smaller school,
Well.
and that sometimes that means that there are some opportunities that we are required to offer and will continue to offer, like they must have a math class, they must have the differentiated science classrooms, they must have all of that, and they must have the daily PE. They will have that, but will they be able to have art as an elective? Will they be able to have drama as an elective? Will they be able to have dance as an elective, as we see at our larger middle schools? I'm not sure, but the school, and Mr. Turner, at the next item, he will be able to speak a little bit about the planning process and what he hopes to see.
Well, I'm still hoping that can happen anyway.
We all hope.
And it may be that if a teacher is teaching that one of those subjects at another middle school, might be able to bounce over the other school too. There's ways to work it out. Again, I say we need to make sure that we're educating every child in 7th, 8th grade to the fullest of our ability that we can do it.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't say we can't do it. We're going to say we're going to do all we can to make it happen.
Exactly.
So I'm going to keep saying that every day until I hear otherwise. No. Okay, then the other thing was, what did I say? I was concerned on the, for the M. Pauline Brown students. Are we sure that those that we're saying, looking at a map, that it's better to send them to another school, what's their ability to get there? Because every time we've talked about M. Pauline Brown, it's always come up that the students cannot get to the school without walking around clear across town in the busiest sections, and with parents that do not drive. So aside from just looking at a map and looking at this and saying, okay, we're going to move this many houses out of this, blah, blah, blah. Let's be sure that what we're doing is not going to hinder the ability of our students to get to those classrooms and to those schools. So I want to make sure we're not looking at streets rather than looking at how to get there. So that was another one of my concerns. And the other one was, oh, yes. I think I mentioned in another meeting before. While we're going to be bringing more students into Ben Franklin, there was the rumor or suggestion or something that we may be using the science lab for classroom. And I want to be sure that we're not forgetting that issue, that that's not going to happen, because I think that we can't lose something like that that's so important to our students. So let's make sure before we approve something that everything is totally mapped out, because that's been an issue in the past when we voted on something and then found out, whoops, it's not working. Let's be sure that what we're doing doesn't look easy on paper and hard to accomplish. So tell me that we're going to keep the science lab.
I think I did during the
Yeah,
presentation.
but yeah.
So I
Okay.
did say that.
Okay. Everybody hear that? Let's write it down.
It was
Okay.
at the last meeting.
I know,
Yeah.
but I'm still hearing the rumors.
Well, rumors are different than
Probably the
fact.
best way to deal with that is to not repeat the rumors.
I think my focus as a board member is to be sure that everything we do is thought out, that
Yes.
we know the real plan, that we see it in black and white, and that we know before we vote, and maybe be sorry later. That's all. You know, that's how I am. Gotta be sure.
Sorry. All right, I just want to make sure I'm clear. So there's 5 schools that are impacted right now?
Primarily, there are 2 schools. That would be well, 3 schools, MP Brown, Garden Village, and Tobias schools.
All right, so
Those
those,
are the ones that have the population, not problem, opportunity. They have the population issues. Those are the ones that are expanding into non-instructional space to accommodate classrooms.
so if the changes that we are attempting to make is to spread the numbers out between those 3 schools, are they still going to be impacted?
Well, for the Tobias and the MP Brown components, they will lose their 6th grade, so they do have additional classrooms available to continue accommodating the current students they have. Garden Village is a different story. Garden Village has traditionally taken 1 to 2 classrooms of students who are transferring into the school, so we would have to limit the number of students who would transfer from outside of their attendance, because they are in their library right now.
I guess I'm asking this because in the long term, should we be looking at building another school? I mean, what's really happening?
No, I don't think we need to build another school. If, in fact, this preschool initiative does roll out, and depending on the timeline for implementation, we will probably be looking at adding classrooms
Adding
at
classrooms.
different, across the school district.
All right.
And realistically, I would guess that over the next, say, 20 years, most of our schools will need rebuilding.
Well, if you're
That's
talking
true.
about the 3 schools that are, say, that they're impacted, the reason they're impacted, they have the less amount of classrooms.
Right.
So, you know, that's why it's, you can only put so many kids.
Question
Yes.
about the possible K-8. How much is it going to cost to go with that, and then where's the money going to come from?
Yeah, so we can talk about that at the next item. How about that?
Okay.
Because we're sort of stealing Mr. Turner's thunder.
But are we approving doing it?
We're not, no, that would be a separate, that's why it's a separate item. This item here is for the grade configuration shifts and the boundary shifts.
And when would these take place? We're asking to vote on this tonight, correct? And when would the numbers change and everything?
So that would be for next school year. So, and like I said, the boundary shifts, that's a slower process.
Right.
It happens over 4 to 5 years, but it would happen with this year's incoming kindergarten class. We will still maintain that intra-district transfer, that policy that we have, and has been very popular. giving people choice about which school to attend, and generally there's at least 10 seats at almost every school that are taken from students that don't live in that attendance area.
All right, thanks.
So there's, question is, we just came back from Christmas break, so have all the parents been pretty much given the same information that we have here about the changes from their streets and all this?
The street information, they have not. That was given in the general sense and spoken about generally on those maps that we looked at a couple of months ago. But I just recently requested the listing of street names, so I didn't receive this until Monday afternoon, because I wanted to look at it by street name instead of by a map. But everything else has been part of the open dialogue at the different meetings that we had in the fall.
I've attended two of them, the meetings, and there were very little participation as far as, going to that meeting because of the time. I think it was also 6 o'clock was early for some folks. But I don't know that there was as much of an understanding of what was happening. But as much as I like the public to know everything so they don't be complaining about it later, is that would it behoove us to let everyone know what changes are going to be coming about before we take action. We're going to have people coming afterwards talking about, well, blah, blah, this and blah, blah, that. So, I don't know. I just feel
Are you
like
referring to the street names?
I'm referring that I don't think every parent, every family in this district knows exactly what's happening here.
But the street names
Are
that,
important, because if they're living and across the street or down the street, they're going to the school they want to go to, and they find out that they haven't had an opportunity to speak up about it.
but I think the adjustments were made based on the preferences of the people.
In large part. I mean, many of these, as I'm looking at it and reading it, seem to me to reflect what people, they've already voted with their feet on these in a lot of cases, as I understand it. That is, a lot of the students that we're transferring, where we're adjusting, is largely because those students are already going to that other school. The families, in a sense, who are most affected by this in any case are the ones who aren't yet enrolled in our district, and those are very hard to reach. And it would be nice to, let the ones who are going to have kindergartners in a couple of years express their opinions. But if they're anything like I was when I had one who was going to be a kindergartner in a couple of years and another one who was even younger, that was like the last thing on my mind. And it's very hard to reach that.
I think as far as the grade configuration goes, I think this is a conversation that has happened at many PTA meetings and at many site council meetings over the last 3 years. Now, can I assure you that every family at that school site knows about it? I cannot. I cannot assure you. Can I assure you that this has been a conversation over the last 2 or 3 years at these different school sites? Yes. And that some families know about this? Yes. And I think we have families present here today to demonstrate that they are aware that you are voting on some of this grade configuration. And I think we have some families here from, I believe, at least Westlake, who would like to show that they are in favor of keeping that as a K-6 and not K-5 as it was originally proposed in the first 3 options.
We'll say that none of them turned
We,
in.
how many meetings have we actually had as a board talking about this issue?
This specific issue, this would be our 2nd meeting.
So, all right, that's what I thought.
There were 3 public meetings held through the fall, in addition to the board meeting where we discussed
4
it.
public meetings in
4
the fall.
public meetings.
And I think the only school that really was well represented was Tobias.
Ben Franklin had a large number of students and families attend from some of the feeder schools.
Well, okay.
Are there further questions or discussion?
I would like to motion that we approve the possible school boundary and grade configuration changes that are
Wait,
presented
don't we
here.
have some secret cards?
Those are for the next item.
Oh, sorry, okay.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the school boundary and grade configuration at Westlake. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition?
Is it just Westlake, or is it for all of the schools?
I'm sorry,
As
Westlake, Tobias,
proposed.
Brown, Wilson,
Okay,
and...
as proposed.
As
Okay.
proposed, yes. He actually said that, I was just repeating what he said.
Okay.
Okay. Now we have item 3 on transforming FDR to a K-8 school. And I believe this is where we call on Mr. Turner to present that.
Yeah, so Mr. Turner will come and speak a bit to the process that his school has undergone to go through this process, to go through this information process and some results, and ask that we authorize them to be able to move forward with planning.
First off, I want to thank the board for allowing me to come and present to you and discuss with you about transforming FDR into a K-8. I think as Mr. Vidalis presented in his presentation, that is a consideration that we would definitely like at FDR. When I became principal last year of FDR, one of my main concerns was sort of the declining enrollment from years ago. Right now, our enrollment is down to 278 students. And we have lots of empty classrooms, we have lots of space. And the consistent message I get is that when I talk to parents, whether they're from Pacifica, sorry, you're waving to somebody. Wasn't sure if there's a bird flying in here or something. You know, or from parents, you know, if you look at the boundary map, I don't, if you remember it, but the boundary goes from basically Pacifica all the way to San Francisco. When parents come to enroll in FDR, a lot of our parents are closer to Westlake, or they can see Tobias right across the street. And most parents inevitably go, I'd like to go there, because that's, you know, a 2-second walk to, or, you know, 2-block walk to that school, and coming to FDR is about a 10-minute drive. But whenever I brought up the idea to parents, I said, well, what if we were K-8? They go, well, I would go there. I'd come to your school. And I go, wow, well, it's just that simple. Okay, I mean, you know, I mean, growing up, I went to a K-8, and I loved it. It was a small learning environment. They did have electives, you know, and depending on the school, you know, I was at Paul Cita Middle School for 11 and a half years, 6.5 years as a teacher, and 5 years as a vice principal. The elective choices did change there depending on the teaching staff that you have. And to be honest, you know, if we were to become a K-8, the elective choices will depend on the teaching staff that we have. You take the people's strengths. And sometimes we had art at Paul Cita, and some years there was no art. Some years you had computer classes, and other years you didn't. Now, I'd love to say that we could offer all of those all the time at FDR, but you can't. You have to be realistic. So last year, we, in thinking about moving to a K-8, what we decided to do was send out a survey to parents. Okay, and that survey came back that basically, I'd say about 50% of the parents were really in favor of it, another 23% were sort of on the fence, and another 25% were sort of, or 26 or 7% were sort of like, I'm not, no, not, they weren't really interested. And I sent those results to Mr. Vidalis and the board, or not, I don't think the board, just the admin council. And this year, they wanted to basically table that last year and sort of relook at it again this year. And when we did that, the results came back that more people wanted to become a K-8. Right now, the percentages I had back from the community was about 58% wanted to be to move to a K-8. Another 13% were sort of undecided. So it's about 71% that basically you have sort of going, leaning maybe towards that direction, and about 28, 29% that basically didn't think about it, weren't in favor of it. The interesting thing is that even though there were 29% that weren't in favor of going to a K-8, when you asked them if they would stay at FDR, if we were a K-8, that number increased. So they weren't in favor of it, but then they wanted to stay. So, you know, I think the retention rate would be fairly high. We did also poll the staff. For certificated teachers, I believe all but one certificated teacher was in favor of moving to a K-8. Okay, the classified staff had a lot of questions, and theirs was a little bit different because they had questions about staffing, because sometimes in the middle schools the staffing is different for classified staff than it would be in the elementary, and they weren't so sure about those things, and I tried to answer a lot of those questions, but I have a lot more undecided in that category. You know, the big question will be, what programs will we offer? Will we be able to meet the needs of our students? You know, and to that I can tell you that, you know, I've worked in an elementary school, I've worked in a middle school, I'm fairly good with scheduling, I'm fairly good with manipulating things to make sure that kids get what they need. But yes, there are certain things that will not be offered in a K-8. When I originally sent out a survey, I sent home the pros and cons of each. More elective choices in a middle school. PE with locker rooms in a middle school. You know, there are a lot of positives for K-8 that studies have shown, from lower suspension rate to an increase in community, because students who have kindergarten teacher when they go to 8th grade, they're not going to act up because they see their kindergarten teacher over there and they're like, hi, you know. And, you know, I love the middle schools, and I was there for a while, and I love Policita, but there's also a lot of positives to FDR being a K-8. I know there are a lot of parents here and faculty and community members here who I think would like to speak to that, and I'm willing to answer any questions, but, you know, I don't have all the answers. You know, what I would suggest that and this is something that I would really like is, you know, I know the suggestion was to open up a 6th grade section next year, because you ideally want 2 6th grades that go to 2 7th grade and then 2 8th grade, so you have 6 classes in the middle school, because otherwise the offerings are limited. Right now, we only have 1 4th, 1 5th, and 1 6th. We need to increase that enrollment, but I'd also like to do it from the bottom up. I believe, you know, I live in San Francisco, and you know, when I have lots of friends who have kids and are enrolling, the K-8 schools are the ones that usually go first. Those in the immersion schools, which they offer. I believe if we also possibly, right now, we typically have 2 kindergarten. If we were thinking about for next year, adding another kindergarten class, the possibility of a 3rd one, I believe if people were informed in Daly City, we would get a 3rd kindergarten enrollment class. And then that's how you would build it up from 3K to 3 first, to 3 second, to 3 third, to 2 fourth, to 2 fifth, 2 6, 2 7, 2 8. And that's a sustainable model for a school without going into split classes, which is basically where we're heading next year if we don't do any of these things.
And we have
So,
the classrooms.
split classrooms like a 3-4 or a 5-6. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you have. I think there may have been some people who did give cards to
There are
speak.
quite a lot of speaker cards, and I think perhaps we will hear the public input, and then we'll probably come back to you with our questions based on those. Mr. Verdelis, why don't you start off, if you can, with the
Yes,
comment from Janet Harrison.
I
who wasn't able to
received,
be here.
I received a letter from Ms. Janet Harrison, who's a teacher at the school site, and she's not able to be here, but wished for me to communicate her letter. She writes, "To Jefferson Elementary School District Board members, I'm unable to attend tonight, but I hope my letter will be noted. I'm very much in favor of making FDR a K-8 school. Here are some of the reasons I've heard parents mention that I also value. It would make an easier transition into the middle school. Younger siblings will be at the same school instead of being scattered across the district, thus needing to transport to different locations. The familiarity, continuity, and camaraderie with former teachers will exist. There'd be less chance of losing younger students to other schools for families who want to keep their siblings close to each other. And there would be an increased possibility for more interesting peer interaction. Thank you, Ms. Janet Harrison, 3rd grade teacher."
Start that, maybe we can do the 3 minutes. Diane Crowell?
Oh, yeah,
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Diane Kroll. I'm the secretary at FDR. I'm also an employee, yeah, I guess I would be an employee of the school district. Also a grandparent of the school, and I serve on different committees. There's lots of committee members here from our school site council and from our PTA and different volunteers that we have in the school here tonight. I'm speaking tonight for 2 other people, my husband, who's the grandfather too, and a volunteer in special ed, and my son-in-law, who is on the SSC committee, PTA, and a volunteer himself. This is a long time coming. Ms. Brizuela and I have gone back many, many years, 30 years, and this was a dream that I had 30 years ago, that school. would remain viable and become one day a K through 8. I think it's a wonderful option for the district to offer this to parents, along with the other options that we have, to give them that option of staying in one school. It's a wonderful school. I've worked at a lot of schools. We got it going on. We do. We have a lot of great programs that we're bringing in through funds that we've been raising, Art in Action, and different things we've been able to offer, to supplement to the district and offer. I really hope you consider a yes on this. I think that, as Mr. Turner said, most everyone I've come across or come into the office to see what's going on this is very excited about it and wanting to get started in it. And I never thought I'd be coming here asking you to make my job a little more difficult. I think this is the first time I've ever had to say, please make my job more difficult. But I am. I'm sincerely asking you to make my job more difficult. Please add more work, and please add a couple grades. I think we have a wonderful staff, warm, we get the job done. A lot of innovative things with our gardens and our art and the different things we have around there. Wonderful volunteers that we count on in all phases of FDR life. We're lucky to have Mr. Turner's experience in junior high. 'Cause I personally don't have any, but I'm ready for it, and I think most of the staff is ready for it too. I think it'd be a wonderful addition to our community, and I just want to urge you in 20 seconds or less to consider it and do it and make me more miserable. Actually, this is on my bucket list, as Marie knows. It's wonderful to see that 3 schools that they were going to close 30 years ago are now impacted
That's right.
by high attendance. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
30 years.
Nicole Feldman?
Good evening. My name's Nicole Feldman. I work at the Latchkey Alternative Center, which is on the grounds of Franklin D. Roosevelt. We have a program for ages 2 to 13 years old. We have been there for 27 years, since 1984. I am a graduate of Franklin D. Roosevelt. My oldest son is a graduate of Franklin D. Roosevelt. Many years ago, when my son graduated, we had 520 students at that school. And now, as Mr. Turner said, we are pretty low. Years ago, I was getting extremely concerned because FDR is dear to all of our hearts, as Diane was mentioning. And I did some research on becoming a K through 8. I interviewed Terra Nova principal, the Oceana principal. I wanted to know if those kids coming out of a K through 8 were any less ready for high school. And unanimously, I got the answer, absolutely not. They were actually more prepared for high school. They had smaller classes, they had more of a chance to mature, they had an opportunity to prepare for high school. And then I even went into the Pacifica schools. Many, many years ago, Pacifica schools you didn't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. You know, it was a kind of a low district. Nobody was really interested in it. Now, I believe when I went on a tour about 5 years ago, trying to make us a K through 8, talking to the principal, he says he has about 20% of Daly City students in his K through 8 program. FDR, if you noticed on the thing there, if anyone's ever been down to us, we are down. So we are literally on the borderline of Pacifica. And I've even met a doctor at Kaiser who lives in Daly City, but wanted a K through 8 program, and he is in Pacifica. So along with becoming a K through 8, I just feel the survival of FDR and the future of FDR for not only our program, but for the community and everyone around is just extremely important to make a reason for people to come to us. Some type of magnet, some type of STEM, some type of K through 8, something that makes us different and stand out. We already stand out because we're an amazing group. We're very close. and we are always there for each other, no matter what it is. But even more so, we need the parents to say, I want to go there. I want to go down there. And this is an amazing beginning, and I'm extremely excited that it was on the agenda. And thank you very much for allowing us the opportunity to let you know how excited we are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jim Feldman.
Hi, my name is Jim Feldman, and I'm her dad. And it's 29 years, not 27. She said most of the things that I wanted to say. A few of the things, though, that I wanted to, address Marie, that if you go on the tour, and anyone can go on the tour of, Valleymar or any of the schools, that you can see how they addressed all the problems that you think about before going into a K-8 school. And they've done such a great job with it. Their schools, it's almost like you're walking into a private school. It's a public school, and you go, wow, this is amazing. As a matter of fact, I was on the long-term enrollment committee with Mateo Rizzo before, and we actually went together to these meetings, and we were both very, very impressed, and you would be too if you saw it. The one other thing I wanted to mention too is those schools are lottery schools. People have to work to get into them. It's not just you just go there. So, and it's hard to get into those schools. So I'd like to see Daly City, and especially FDR, since I've been there for many, many years. My son, who is actually older than her, he went there too. So I'd like to see it grow and go to this next level. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Feldman. And we'll finish up with Melinda Dart. Oh, you have anything further to say? You've said all you need to say on that? Okay. Great. So then that is all the public comments I have cards for. Any discussion from board members?
I think it can, looking at how some of the schools are impacted, if we had an option of K-8, it might alleviate some of that. In addition to allowing an option, because right now in Daly City, correct me if I'm wrong, but the only K-8 schools are private schools, so
Right.
residents have to pay. So I think it'd be a good option.
Well, definitely, I've spoken out in support of it in past meetings, so just looking forward to us voting on it.
Well, I'm just going to say that I visited many of the schools in Pacifica, so I saw how they work, and they work well. So I do know they work well. And I know that the advantage to having K-8 is also the community thing and for the students to be together. And it is like a private school. I understand that. And the only thing I said earlier was to make sure we get some things that I know you're going to get for the kids. And we'll work on that. We'll remind you. Diane Kroll mentioned something that many years ago there was this big thing about we've got to close schools, and it was 4 schools on the chopping board. And Diane was PTA president, I think, at the time. Were you not? I think. And she organized what they called the walkover, because on paper it was easy to say, let's send the kids that are around that area after we close the school over to on the west side. That meant crossing the highway. It was a very successful thing to make people go out there and walk, and to see how dangerous it would be for our students. So thank God we didn't close the school, and we voted against it. I know administration that time wasn't happy with us. They said we were going to go bankrupt. We didn't go bankrupt. And at that time, I remember the question came up then is, why can't we have K-8? Because that school, FDR, is literally on the end of the road, isolated, and it's funny because there's a couple of schools that are in Pacifica that are closer to us than FDR is, just the way the land goes. But anyway, so I'm very much in favor of it, as long as we work really hard to make sure that we do all the extras for those students. And I think that everybody's, wanting to do this, so it sounds like a positive. So I definitely would like to see that. The one thing I also, and something that I'm just going to say now, that we can think about later, is that the way to increase our schools to the maximum of making everybody happy to be there, and why Pacifica was doing the lottery thing too, is that you make magnet schools. So if you can't afford to have, drama and art in every single school, and you decide to select one school that has that, then that's who's going to knocking on that door to go there. And then something else like a Chinese speaking school, starting from kindergarten going all the way up. So there's different things that can be done later on that we can do to increase the education for our kids and make the parents happy. Then they don't mind getting in the car and driving a little further, okay? Because let's face it, you ever go around the schools during starting and ending? I've never seen so many cars in my life going there, so they pick their kids up and drive most of the time. But there are some schools, and I want to be sure that as we look at Ann Pauline Brown, those students that are there, that if they come to us and say they're not able to get there, that we listen to them and perhaps make it available to them to stay at Ann Pauline Brown. Okay, so with that, I say I support it.
Mr. Teddy, do you have any questions or comments?
Similar to Principal Turner, I too was a student of K through 8 school. I believe it provided me with a great opportunity in terms of an academic and social education. The K through 8 experience provided me with a great educational support structure, which offered the opportunity to create relationships with student peer mentors, teachers, and classified staff over a long period of time that encouraged and cultivated the learning process. As proof positive of my K through 8 experience, my school provided me with the foundation to have the academic skill sets to be accepted to, in my opinion, one of the greatest public high schools in the area, Lowell High School, and the greatest public university, UC Berkeley. I believe transforming Franklin D. Roosevelt to a K-8 school. Remember, public. I still am in awe of Stanford and its football team. I believe transforming Franklin D. Roosevelt to a K-8 school will be in the best long-term interest of our students and develop and academically and socially. Students who I believe will be the next generation of doctors, engineers, and teachers. Students who will be our future leaders, which I believe will be our future heroes. Let's give FDR the opportunity to become one of the brightest beacons of light in our district.
Okay, it's probably not even necessary for me really to go over the reasons why I'm in favor of this, but I'm going to mention a few anyway, just because they do kind of address some of the things that, one thing that, just taking some notes from what I heard and what comes into my mind as I hear them. One thing is, I think that makes FDR maybe sort of singularly good for making this transition is that they already have such a strong arts program in place there. So you have, I know you've got the people to have some of those key electives because they're already doing it with younger children. And of course, it is a school that has a real need to deal with the problem of that isolation that has caused the dropping enrollment. And I hadn't really realized until some people were talking there, I guess you, Mr. Feldman, about how many of our students may be going down to Pacifica. So it occurs to me that creating this K-8 may help to bring some of our district's enrollment back from the private schools, the Pacifica schools, and of course increased enrollment is always good for our bottom line as well as I think for the students because of course we're the best. And I like the plan as you've proposed it here to roll it out 1 year at a time, so we've got time to plan, starting with expanding the 6th grade. This will also give a place for some of the parents whose children had been in schools with losing the 6th grade, who are not ready to send their 6th graders to junior high, will have the option then of applying and going to FDR. I suspect there will be some spaces. Some of the FDR parents may want their children to go to the junior high. There's going to be the flexibility there through the system that is already in place. And so I like that we're stepping it in 1 year at a time. We ought to be able to address problems as they come up. And I think we all do have to recognize that there will be lots of benefits for students in a K-8, and that some of those benefits will be different from the benefits that they would get at a dedicated middle school. So it's not necessarily going to be exactly the same, but, I mean, I was hearing arguments both ways there on what's better, and my guess is, of course, that that very much depends on the student, what is a better fit for that, but I have a lot of confidence in our ability to meet the needs of those children in a K-8 at FDR. So, that being said, I've lost track of my agenda,
Well,
but
that being said, I would like to, because I don't want to lose Diane over there. No, just kidding. I want to make her work harder.
yes.
I'd like to make
We'll
a.
offer her some more support, too.
Yeah, yeah. No, I would like to make the motion that we approve making FDR the K-8. I know it will be successful because I think we have all the key players there. Diane will make it work. Fritz will make it work. And the teachers are right on top of it. So I'd like to make that motion and that we'd be proud of our K-8 school.
I second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposition? Wonderful. Congratulations, FDR.
And may I just put up a good plug in for Mr. Feldman? Because long ago, when they wanted to close the school and they were saying enrollment was down, at one time, FDR had 3 sessions. That's how many children were at that school. It was something like 800. I forget, but they had to have sessions. So when Mr. Feldman opened up the latchkey, the enrollment went way up high because the parents were looking for something where they could send their children to a preschool and continue on the same campus. So thank you for helping us keep FDR.
Yes, thank you. Okay, this brings us to Section 2, Curriculum and Instruction. That doesn't make sense.
It's acceptance of donations, yeah.
Yeah, the acceptance of donations. We have our usual,
Once again, this is my favorite part. Every penny counts in our district, and I want to thank the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors via the Tech Innovation Award Grant, Mr. Nelson Lee, Mrs. Donna Laxina Valle, Mrs. Ngale Juan, and Ms. Dolores Heisinger. Thank you very much for your donations.
and we set a motion to accept those.
And
with
that is a
thanks.
motion to accept the donations. Thank you.
Second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
I have a question on that, Mr. Vidalis.
Yes.
I noticed all the time in our agenda package, it shows the principal sending a thank you. We still send one, don't we, from the district?
No, because the gift is made at the school site.
I know, but we used to before, but we don't do that anymore?
We haven't done that.
Well,
I
not
don't
for-
think-
since
yeah,
you've been here,
not-
but-
And it's not since before I was there. That was not the practice.
Yeah.
But
But it would be nice to acknowledge, because we're sitting here accepting it, because we're the
Maybe.
ones that accept all the monies, all the donations we accept.
I think it's a good point. Maybe we should talk about it later and put a limit on, for a certain amount when the district would also send out another thank you.
Okay. Well, we
'Cause
can put
don't-
that on our future agenda to
I
discuss.
think
if
any
that's-
PR communications we do is excellent for this district.
Yeah, for sure. I
So
agree.
If anything, I'd like to offer my time to, I'll handwrite these things
The
if needed.
thank you?
To say thank you.
Just going to say
I
the
love you
same
guys.
thing. Yeah.
It's
important.
Okay.
Sure.
Section 2, Item 3, Local Control Accountability Plan Overview.
Yes, so this is a huge change in the way schools are funded, and I know Ms. Kessler has actually shared a lot about the local control funding formula, or LCFF. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it tonight, but I'm also going to focus on the local control accountability plan that goes with this funding. It's still in development. They're still working on a template, and so I'm just sharing with you what I do know at this time, but I want to keep you informed. So LCFF, local control, funding formula, and the LCAP, the accountability plan. The funding formula replaces the state categorical funding, so the economic impact aid, which we use for our English learners, school and library improvement plan, the class size reduction, instructional materials, all of that is now going to become one lump sum, one big pot of money. It's no longer going to be in categories. And this is going to be fully funded, we hope, over time. So it's not intended to be fully funded until 2021. And so, but it all depends on the economy and the funding that comes in through the state. And so districts like us with high concentration of English learners, EL, and low income, LI, students, were scheduled, if the funding comes through, to see significant funding increases by 2021 if it's fully funded, and it's going to be gradual over time. So we don't want to get too excited just yet, because we're still basically maintaining status quo right now, but it will, the intent is to have increased funding for districts with these high concentrations. So to give you an illustration of how it's funded, and I know Ms. Kessler has shared this before, so if you look down at the chart here with the little light blue, EL is English learner, LI is low income. So every student, actually if you look at the red, every student will get a base rate. So almost $6,900 per child. And then if they're in kindergarten through third grade, they get an additional, our district would be funded an additional $712 per child. And so what it is, though, is that if the district that has English learners and low-income students, they also get a supplemental $1,500 on top of these two amounts for all of the students that are English learners and low-income up to 55%. Our district is over 55%, so we're going to get that 55%, the $9,000 per student. And then we're also going to get on top of that an additional $3,800 about for students that are above that 55%. Our district right now is about 73.5%. It's a little lower than last year. That's the unduplicated counts. So you can't be English learner, get counted, and low income and get counted again. You get counted only once.
You might be able to get a couple 100%, which would be
So for that 18.5% that's over that 55% threshold, we would get an additional, we would get $12,800 per student. And I know Ms. Kessler has explained this in the past as well, but I just wanted to reorient you to how the funding works. And so with this additional funding, and what I want to focus on is the accountability plan. And so every district is going to be required to complete a plan that discloses how we're spending the money. And it's a very complete plan. That we have a local education agency plan, or a LEA plan, that has to be incorporated into this LCAP. And it's all about providing high-quality education. So basically, your plan has to be developed first, and then the budget fits into that where the funding goes. So what does it must include? So you have to have annual goals. So every year, you have to make sure that you have goals for the year. And each goal, or the goals, have to be based on 8 state priorities for all students and numerically significant student groups or subgroups. And so that means students that have valid test scores, so like the Smarter Balanced New Assessment, or formerly known as, not formerly known as, but the previous test, the CST, it was based on students that had valid test scores. So if we have 30 students in a certain student group, like we had at least 30 English learners, then that would be a significant, numerically significant student group for us. There is one exception for foster youth. It's only 15 students or more. So if we have 15 students that are foster youth, then that's considered numerically significant. And we have to show progress for those students. So the 8 priority areas, you can see in the graphic here, they are student achievement, student engagement, other student outcomes, school climate, parental involvement, basic services, implementation of the new Common Core State Standards, and course access. And if you look at the next slide, this gives you a description of what those areas are and some indicators of performance and how we can determine if we've met those 8 priority areas. So student achievement would be the standardized testing, the new Smarter Balanced Assessment, and focusing on also our English learners and how they perform on their California English Language Development Test, or CELT, which will also change to a different testing system in the next few years. Student engagement is on attendance, the chronic absenteeism, and dropout rates as well. So we have to track that, which